All right, so it's week 5. Um, and today we're going to be talking about the strategy dimension. Remember that we spoke before about the 3 dimensions of leadership, and strategy is one of them. And we're going to go into detail. We're going to go into sense making, alignment, and planning. There are 9 core competencies when it comes to leadership. So remember, we spoke about the leadership styles that the leader needs the context. They need to understand the context. They need to understand the worldviews and resonate with them or the worldviews of the follower. And they also need to be competent. They need to be competent in certain areas. They need to be able to do the things they're supposed to do. So in the next 3 classes, we're going to be talking about those competencies, what makes a leader competent. So today specifically, we're talking about 3 competencies within the strategy dimension, which is, like I said, sense making, alignment, and planning. All right. So I don't know if you remember this from the first class, but it's exact what I just said. This is the model for the 3 dimensions of leadership capabilities. And just as a refresher, remember that all leaders have a responsibility to set the direction, which is having a plan, which is what we're going to talk today, that involves the strategy dimension, assemble or manage a team, which includes relationship, communication, motivation, and interpersonal dynamics. And that is the team dimension, which we're going to be talking about next week. And then leaders have the responsibility to execute that plan with the help of others and manage the process to get it done properly. And that is the execution dimension. All right. So here's a little diagram just so you have a mental picture of what I'm talking about. So again, strategy deals with sense making, alignment, and planning. So this aspect of leadership is concerned with all the activities that have to do with evaluating challenges and opportunities in the current environment, strategic thinking, prioritizing strategic objective, crafting high leverage strategic plans. And I'm sure that if you've ever been part of a leadership team, you've heard these words before. You've heard your leaders probably telling you, you have to be strategic. You have to create a plan. You have to analyze, what's going on. You have to see what the issue is and make sure that you create a strategic plan to execute. Um, you probably heard things like you need to analyze the data to make sure that you come up with a plan. So all of that comes from here. And today we're going to be um, basically talking about this. We want to be able to come up with a strategy to be able to work with a team and finally execute it. So what is sense making? It sounds weird, right? Sense making, what is that? And basically it's the process by which people give meaning to their collective experience. That's just a fancy term. But to go into more detail, um, effective leaders help followers make sense of the world, their business, and their work. Sense making refers to how leaders structure the unknown so that they can make sense of what's happening and respond accordingly in ways that support steering their organizations towards shared outcomes and goals. So pretty much as a leader, when you are um, experiencing sense making or doing this for your team, what you're basically doing is helping your team understand what's going on. So you're really asking the question, what is really happening and what can we do about it? So by asking those questions and by helping your team understand what's really happening, that's how you are doing sense making in a way. So sense making in leadership. So there are three things leaders need to do when we are working in that core competency. Leaders must understand what's going on in the environment in which the organization is operating. Leadership must have an adequately comprehensive and at least marginally accurate understanding of what the essential question, what is happening. So you need to understand this. Whenever you're faced with a problem, whenever you want to do something, you need to first get to the root of the of what's happening. So that is the first step. The second step, leadership must create a plan or a mental model of the environment, emphasizing the changes that have occurred or are currently occurring. So you need to know your environment. You need to understand what's going on around you to be able to create that plan. And third, leadership must continually revise this map as the territory changes over time. So you have to be able to, as time passes, you have to really revise what this map looks like and make adjustments if necessary. Whenever you stop checking that mental map, whenever you stop, you know, um, checking your assumptions and checking how this map or this territory looks like, that's when we start failing as leaders. Whenever I think of leadership, like if you think about, for example, Napoleon, I don't know if that's a good example, but like a leader, just going ahead, leading their people, as a leader in a military scenario, you have to know the territory. You see, they, in the movies, they have a big table, they have a map, you have a bunch of people surrounding that map, and you're creating strategies. But you always get that scene with the map, right? Like, if you're seeing Game of Thrones, if you're seeing any movie about military, about wars, you always see a scene where the leaders are surrounding a table looking at a map because you first need to understand the territory before you tell your people to go march in and do what they need to do. So this is a very important part of the sense making core competency. Now, when we are proficient in sense making, where our teams are really good at this, you're going to see things like discussing situations, understanding core drivers, and deciding on actions. Again, you don't have one person telling everybody what to do. This is a consensus. We have a team where we're analyzing the data together. We are looking at the situations, really understanding what's driving certain things, what's impacting our ability to do certain things. And then we decide together how to move forward. And then obviously we act, we execute that. Higher proficiency involves using analytical tools and considering multiple perspectives for a nuanced understanding of complex situations. Now, you probably, if you read about this, you're going to come across these three concepts: sense making, meaning making, and mental models. They're all very similar. So I just wanted to quickly give you the difference just so you don't get confused. So sense making involves giving meaning to collective experiences. Now, meaning making relates to how individuals construct their views. So this is more aligned with what we have spoken in the past about the worldviews. And then the mental models refer to the internal representations of external reality. So this is pretty much an explanation of someone's thought process about how something works in the real world. Why is this important? Because meaning making and mental models will impact why a certain individual thinks the way they do, and this will affect their decisions and their actions. So having that understanding is very important. Now, there are three-dimensional awareness practice. And basically, we're talking about self, others, and circumstances. You have to be very aware of these three things. You have to have self-awareness. You have to be aware of what other people think and what they're doing, and you have to be aware of the circumstances. And having this ability of this three-dimensional awareness helps leaders analyze situations, identify important issues, and make informed decisions. Again, awareness in self, others, and circumstances. So leadership and vision. Leaders envision a future that reflects growth, improvement, and change. You always have to have a vision. You have to have an objective. You have to know where you're going. So when you have movement to the element of time, meaning it's in the future, right? We're going somewhere in the future. We're not going backwards. We're going forward. We can imagine that we journey to and arrive to a new destination of some sort over time. And that destination is what we call the vision. So whenever we're talking about where we want to be, again, we're not talking about goals, we're not talking about numbers, we're talking about a vision. It's a very important distinction. That vision is more complex, is more inspiring. That's where we want to be, where we want to get as an organization. Now, alignment is the second competency, and vision is part of that alignment. And alignment involves establishing the directional statements like purpose, values, and vision. So I'm sure you all know the core values that we have here. We hire around our core values. We're always talking about the core values. When we give people praise, we do it around the core values. And again, to have alignment in the organization, it's extremely important that you first come up with your set of values. You need to understand what your values are so you can steer the organization in the right direction. Because people, when you give people a number, when you tell people what to do, you can get compliance, but compliance doesn't necessarily mean that people are following you, that people are engaged with the vision. Just because they're complying doesn't mean they're engaged. In order to engage people, you need to be very precise with your values, with your purpose, and with your vision. And people need to be aligned with that. People need to be able to resonate with those visions, with those values, with that purpose, in order for you to have true alignment with your team. Now, a clear sense of shared vision and values is crucial for organizational success. Leadership effectiveness is measured by how well team members resonate with the company's core values and the leader's vision. When leadership is truly effective and when followers see leaders as credible and feel resonant with those leaders, the leader's style will resonate with the followers' values. And again, this piggybacks from what we learned before about the leadership styles. And that's why it's so important to understand leadership styles, to understand the worldviews of the employees, of the team, to be able to, now put your vision and your values into this mix so you can have resonance with your team. So effective leaders are those whose styles resonate with the followers' values. Again, we hear that word a lot, resonate, resonate, resonate. Remember that you need to resonate in order for the follower to want to follow you as a leader. The role of vision in leadership is to inspire and focus employees. Again, big distinction between vision and goals. Goals are objective, measurable data, numbers, KPIs. But the vision, it's more inspiring. A vision is like a story you tell, right? Why you want to get there? What is the purpose of that? Where do you see the company in 10 years? Not in terms of numbers. When you're sharing your vision, you're not talking about in 10 years, I want to make $1 billion. You talk about how many clients you want to help, you know, um, you want to take over the US, you want to be the biggest personal injury firm, and the why. Why do you want that? All of that is part of your vision. And so when you have your vision, you mix it up with your core values and your purpose, that's what gives life to the alignment. That's how you can align your team. Because if they share your vision, purpose, and values, then people are more likely to do what they need to do or what they want them to do. Not because they need to hit a number, but because they share your vision, because they share your purpose and they share your value. True alignment comes from that. Now, vision versus strategy and goals. Like I said before, goals are analytical and they appear to the logical. Vision is an imagined destination. So strategies inform managers of what to do, and in some cases, how to do it. But they do not address why they should do it. Strategy doesn't tell the team member why they should care. Leaders must go beyond the what and how and create a shared understanding that team members can identify with, take pride in, and commit to. Again, strategies are great. We need the strategy to be able to execute a plan. We need the strategy to make things happen. But people don't really care about that. People care more about the why. And as a leader, you need to be able to articulate the why to people. So whenever you're explaining why it's important to hit that KPI, it's not just sending one more demand. It's not just scheduling one more surgery. It's not settling one more case. Why do we need to do that? What is the impact? You know, who is benefiting? So that is the part that as leaders, we sometimes fail to articulate because we're so busy and we all want to hit numbers and we're so, busy in the day to day. But again, articulating the why, making sure that there's alignment with your vision and purpose and values, super important for vision and strategy. You don't have I mean, you can have a strategy, you can come up with the most brilliant strategy, but if you don't have engagement from your team, nobody's going to get it done. Nobody's going to do it, or people are going to give you minimal effort. And we don't want that. When people go above and beyond, that only happens when there's true alignment. Let me repeat that. When people go above and beyond, that only happens when there's true alignment. We always asking people to go above and beyond. At least I do. As leaders, we always like, oh, go above and beyond, go above and beyond. We need people that go above and beyond. What does that even mean? When people go above and beyond, it's because they truly believe in what the company stands for, in the vision, the purpose, and the values. If they don't, then they're just here for a paycheck and they're not going to go above and beyond. So that's why it's so important in the hiring process that you're hiring around the core values, that you're asking meaningful questions to see if that person will fit the culture. Again, when we talk about culture, what we're really talking about is values. Do you align with my values? Do you identify with our values? And if so, you will be a cultural fit. And that's why we always say that we will let go of a good performer if they're not a cultural fit. Because again, you can be great at your job, you can have amazing skills, but if you don't align with our values, our purpose, and our vision, you're never going to go above and beyond. It's not going to work. Because at the end of the day, true motivation comes from alignment. You have to be aligned to be motivated. Nobody can give you motivation. That's a myth. As a manager or as a leader, you try your best to, have a positive attitude, um, talk to your team, have open dialogue. You have all these tools to make that happen. But at the end of the day, you don't really have the power to motivate people. That motivation comes from within. And so when people are aligned, that's when you see that motivation. When people are not a cultural fit, then they are not motivated. So again, having this in mind, super important when you are hiring, when you are talking to your team, when you're assembling a new team, making sure that the employee aligns with the vision, purpose, and values. So strategic thinking. Now, we're moving into the planning zone. This is where, so first we have sense making, right? We have to really analyze the environment, the territory. We need to see what's going on. We need to help our team understand what's going on. We need to help our team make sense of, the challenges, the opportunities, the strengths, things that can go wrong. That's the first part. Then we go into alignment, which is the values, vision, and purpose. We need to make sure everybody's aligned. We want to articulate these values. Um, One way we do this is that we have it in our merch. We have a lot of teachers with the core values. We have it in a wall. We always articulating this. Super important that we we always talking about it because everybody needs to know what those values are. And then now we're moving into the planning, which in this case, we're going to call it strategic thinking, right? This is the final phase to be able to come up with the strategy. We can define strategic thinking as the process by which the leadership of an organization envisions the organization's future and defines the critical assumptions, factors, and business philosophies necessary to achieve it. That's a lot of fancy words, but basically, this is essential for developing winning strategies, create annual goals, and achieving organizational objective. Oops. Oh, here we go. All right. So how do we do this? Again, I always like to show you the how because the concepts are very nice to understand, are very nice to know, but at the end of the day, we need to put this into practice. And so there are a couple of tools that you can use. A very famous one, you probably heard about it before, is called SWOT. And it basically stands for strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So basically, you have an issue, or something that you want to achieve, right? So let's say you need to increase the productivity of your team, right? So you have to come up with a plan. You have to start with strategic thinking. And how do you do this? You say, okay, what are the strengths? You know, what are the strengths of my team, let's say? What are the weaknesses? What are the opportunities? What are the threats? So you come up with a plan and you test that plan, asking this, running it through these steps. What are the strengths of this plan? If I implement this, what are the strengths? You know, what are the weaknesses? Everything that can go wrong. What are the opportunities? And then finally the threats. There's another one not too common. A PESTLE, PESTLE, and it's basically political, economic, social, technological, and legal environment factors. So you have an issue, you have a problem, you have a plan, whatever it is, and you run it through these things. You analyze it from each standpoint, and that's how you come up with the end result, and that's how you know whether this is something that you can implement or not. So these two things are tools that you can use. I think the first one is the most useful in our current environment, but I wanted to put the other one because it's becoming very popular. So, what is the difference between strategic thinking and strategic planning? The thinking versus the planning. So, strategic planning focuses on analysis, breaking down a goal into steps, then formalizing those steps into a plan that can be articulated, delegated, and executed. So, it's very like very step by step, just breaking it down, very granular, right? But strategic thinking is the process of envisioning an organization's future and defining critical factors for success. So you first need the strategic thinking to then do the strategic planning. You should not be planning without thinking, like without the strategic thinking first. So again, you have to go to this mental map where you have to understand, okay, so what are the factors? What are the critical factors for success? What do I really need? what is really happening, what are the issues, get to the bottom of the issues, and then you can create a plan where you break down a goal into the steps, and then you say, okay, this is the goal, step one, step two, step three, and so on. So when you talk about strategic, again, eh, we always throw these words out there. Oh, we need a plan. We need to think strategically. Make sure that when you are creating a plan, that you're being strategic about it. Let's be strategic. Let's come up with a good strategy. Like we always throw in this. But what are executive doing when you say that somebody is strategic? When a leader is being strategic, what do they do? What are the actions that they are associated with? And basically, they lift their heads above the day-to-day work and view the organization with a big picture perspective. And this is something that I'm always telling my team. It's very easy to get caught up in the day-to-day. But you, as a leader, you have to, you need to take a moment to really analyze what's going on. Get out of the day to day and really take a moment. You need to schedule it, put it in your calendar. You need to force yourself to do it. But as a leader, you have to. You have to look at big picture. You have to analyze. You have to make the time to analyze data and then be able to pinpoint the issues. If you're not doing the analysis, you're not going to recognize the patterns. If you don't see the patterns, you're not going to see the issue, and then the issue is just going to blow up in your face, and then you didn't see it coming. Now when you take the time to make the analysis, look at the data, you know analyze the patterns, then you can see, you're like, I can foresee this happening, so let me course correct now, because if this continues, X, Y, or Z can happen. Now, they also ask questions and challenge assumptions about the organization and the environment in which it operates. Again, we have spoken in the past, great leaders ask great questions. You have to be able to, ask the questions and challenge everybody's assumptions. It's very easy to get comfortable and say, well, we always done it this way. No, like we have to constantly be reviewing, our processes, our system, asking the questions. Okay, this worked 2 years ago. Does this still work? I mean, do we need to change something? What happens if we change it? What are the benefits? What are the downsides? What can we do? So you have to be able to ask a lot of questions to your team. Now, the next thing is that they gather data and interpret it. Going back to the analysis, you have to be able to get objective data. You have to understand, like grab the data and analyze it so you can pinpoint the patterns. And then they use analysis tools and processes to evaluate options and make better choices that are more likely to lead desired organizational outcomes. So I'll give you an example. Let's say we're getting a lot of, client complaints. So the leader comes and says, we're getting a lot of client complaints. We need to change our process. Our process is inefficient. Well, the first thing you have to do is that you have to sit down and really look at big picture, right? Then you ask certain questions like, when you say client complaints, what do you mean? When you say a lot, how much is a lot? What are we talking about? You question, you challenge those assumptions, then you gather the data. Then you say, okay, let me create a report that I can run that shows me how many client complaints we get in a month, right? And then you gather that data, you look at the report, and then you see if it's a significant amount, because it could be your perception. It could be that, because you got a few client complaints back to back, for 3 days, now you assume that there's this ton of complaints, but it's based on perception, not data. But when you gather the data, you're able to see the patterns. Is it one specific case manager? is a one specific department. Like, what is it, right? So you gather your data, you analyze it, and then after you analyze your data, you're able to make a decision of, okay, we need to change the process. This is a huge problem, or okay, this is not as big as we think it is. We can make some little tweaks, but this is not a big issue that we don't have to change our process because the data doesn't show that. Or we definitely need to change our process because the data shows that we have a big, big problem. But you understand how, you go through all the steps to create that plan, to be able to create that plan. You have to go through the steps. Now, how can we develop strategic thinking skills? So first thing is that zoom out, big picture, right? What we just talked about. Again, as leaders, it's very easy to get caught up in the day to day. It's very easy. One demand more, one surgery more, one settlement more, one release more that I have to check. Like it's very easy. Like it gets very mechanical. But if you don't zoom out and you don't look at big picture, you could be running around, like in circles and not making any progress, and you don't even see it. And in your mind, you're like, why am I not getting any results? I work, 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 work. I don't breathe. I'm always working, and yet I don't get the results. Effort doesn't equate results, you know? But when you're strategic about the way you go about your efforts, then you will see the results. But in order to do that, you need to take a moment and and big picture, zoom out. Again, I always tell people, if you're too busy, schedule the time. Put it in your calendar. 15 minutes every day, in the morning, in the afternoon, weekly. You should be analyzing, as leaders, you should be analyzing the data of your team daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly. That's a must. You don't have to wait until we do an annual meeting to run through your data and realize, oh, I see the issue now. You don't have to wait for somebody to force you to gather the data and compile it to present it in a manager meeting to realize that we have an issue. You don't need to wait for your manager to call you into a meeting and tell you, okay, give me the data for you to realize that's happening. You schedule the time, you force yourself, and you analyze this on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, and so on. So objectives. The objective needs to be explicit. And this is where, we have our KPIs, we have goals, we know exactly what we need to do. So we need to have clear targets. Super important. Now, the drivers. What are the key drivers? What's driving the performance? What's driving the results? What's driving what we need to get done? If you identify that, then you can definitely create a plan with that. What are the alternatives? So always have alternatives, have options to consider. Again, like, when you're working with a team, you're supposed to be analyzing different things. Maybe the plan that you had or the way you used to do it doesn't work anymore. So having options, it's important. It helps you open your mind and really consider different scenarios. Prioritize. Clarify your priorities and the trade-offs you intend to make. Super important. It's super important. You need to establish priorities. You have to, you must. How do you do that? You need to understand, okay, I have a goal, right? What affects this goal? Step 1, 2, and 3. Okay. If I do step 1 first, how will that impact the goal? What if I do step 2 first? What if I do step 3 first? And so based on that analysis, then you make your priorities, and that's how you go about it. So being able to effectively prioritize, extremely important in developing your strategic thinking. And finally, socialize, you articulate your strategy. Now you go through all these steps, You create your strategy, and now you have to share it with your team, with your other, leaders, with your leadership team, because you also want people to challenge your assumption, to challenge your plan, to give you ideas, input, resources. So it's very important that you articulate this strategy once you come up with it. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of tips that are practical for enhancing your strategic thinking. And basically, you can use reflection, set aside time to reflect and plan for the future, identify trends, prioritize tasks, and determine where to allocate resources. Again, that goes back to what we just spoke about. Having that time to do that reflection, super important. I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but it's so important. It's so important to analyze your data. How can you see the issues if you don't identify the patterns? How can you identify patterns if you don't set the time to to reflect and to really look at the data, to really collect the data and look at it and examine it and analyze it. So it is super, super important that you do that. Um, that's where you see the trends, and then you see, okay, what priorities I need to set, what resources I need to allocate. All of that comes from the reflection, from really the analysis that you have to make. I would say that, analysis is one of the most important things as a leader that you can do. With no analysis, you're just doing, you're just going through the motions. Now, biases. You have to uncover your own biases because we all have biases. And once you're aware of your biases, you can think more clearly and you can have more perspective. Better data. That's another one. So it's important to listen to the experts in the organization. For example, IT, HR, marketing, sales, depending on the area or the information that you want to gather. So if you know that you want to create a new process and you really need the input of Litify, for example, so you should be talking to the people that know Litify the best. So making sure that you're getting the resources and the information from the people that really know what they're doing, so you can have better data. Again, data is super important. You cannot analyze if you don't have it. So, having all, making sure that you have a good IT system, that your Litify is on point, that you're able to gather all this information, it's key to be able to analyze it. Now, questions. Once again, great leaders ask great questions. You should always be asking questions. You should be asking more than what you say. So the questions you ask your team should be more in compared to the directive that you give to your team. Because this is when you ask great questions, you uncover options and plans. You can always learn something from anybody. And so, again, an area that we can fail as leaders is thinking that we know it all, that we have the absolute truth, that we are the experts on the subject, therefore nobody will do it better than us or have an idea better than ours, and that's wrong. You have to be able to ask questions because people will have great insight and they will give you great ideas. But if you don't ask, you will never get them. And now, when you're asking these questions, you can say things like, is this idea from a credible source? Is this idea logical? So question yourself, question the plan, and ask a lot of questions to your team. Now, consequences. Always explore what can go wrong, what are the weaknesses, and, basically play devil's advocate um, with the ideas that you get to make sure that you have a solid plan, and when somebody's going to question your plan, that you already had that thought process where you already thought of like the consequences and everything that can go wrong with that. And then finally, practice. Like we said from day one, if you don't practice, you never you never are going to achieve it. You have to really practice to develop the skill. All of this, leadership is a skill. Everything that you learn here they're really skills, they're competencies, they're skills, right? So the strategy, be able to create a good strategy, that's really a skill. And that involve all the three competencies. So if you don't practice those competencies, you're never going to get, proficient at it. So practicing to improve the strategic thinking is key. So the more you practice it, the more you do it. And again, going through the steps of the self-reflection, the analyzing, collecting data, all of those things, that's at the end of the day, that's what's going to help you create that strategy so you can execute. And pretty much that's it. I tried to condense it as much as I could. I mean, I could go on and on for hours. Um, but let me unshare my screen. Okay. Hopefully it makes sense. Everything that we spoke about. So do you guys have any questions? Okay, so Gabriela, you have a question? Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Amalia.
Hi.
Um, so my question is, what would you consider, or like, what would be an example of someone going above and beyond?
So you have your KPIs. KPIs are key performance indicators. They're goals, they're targets. That is the floor. A lot of people think of the KPIs as the ceiling, wrong mentality. So KPIs are the floor. When you go above and beyond, it's when you're doing what you go above your job description, right? So you're doing something that might not be in your job description. You are exceeding your KPIs. You are, going above the norm. So you're basically going above the floor in a way. So, and again, this you can achieve this when you have alignment. Because if not, if you don't really care, if you don't believe in the vision of the company, if you don't believe in the values of the company, let's be honest, you're just gonna be here for a paycheck, which is fine. Not everybody, well, it's not, it's fine, but ideally everybody will be aligned in the company. Ideally, everybody will be committed. But as the company grows, it's harder and harder to achieve that. It's very easy when you have a tight, small team. So yeah, but when you start growing, that becomes harder and harder and harder. So those people that are always, going above and beyond, doing extra, having initiative, um, they always volunteer for things that again are outside their job description. Those are the people that usually are aligned with the organization, and that's why they do it, because you're not getting paid extra, right? When you volunteer for something, you're not getting extra compensation for that. You hopefully do it because um, for example, one of our core value is leadership. So whenever I have a team member that volunteers to do something for the team, to me, they're exhibiting the core value of leadership. You're going above and beyond. Like, for example, coordinating a settlement conference. You don't have to, it's not in your job description, right? But you go above and beyond, like you take on that responsibility, you take accountability, which is one of our core values. You say, I'm going to do it. And leadership, right? You're stepping up. It's not in the job description of a case manager, it doesn't say coordinate settlement conference. It's not really part of the job description. Um, but they volunteer, they do it, they follow through for the team. So that's a person that's aligned. In my view, it's aligned with the company. So that's what I mean by going above and beyond. Did that answer your question?
Yes, but I also have another question.
Sure, go ahead.
Are these strategies effective when leading a team with different personalities and different attitudes?
Of course. So again, so for the strategy, we talked about three things, right? So we talked about the sense making, we talked about alignment, and we talked about planning. So you have to incorporate the worldviews and the leadership styles when you're doing this, but it's the same three things. You still have to, in a way that resonates with them, right? In a way that resonates with your audience, you still have to make sense of what's happening and on helping them understand the context, the situation, what's going on, right? then you have to make sure that there's alignment. We're on this together. We're on the same page. And then you have to go through the planning, which how do you plan? You collect the data, you analyze the data, you look at the strength, weaknesses, consequences, everything that can go wrong. You question yourself. You challenge your assumption, your biases. You're aware of your biases. You come up with, different solutions or possibilities. And then once you create all of that, you identify the patterns and all of that, and you create your strategy, then you articulate it, right? So it's the same for everything. It's just the how you do it. It depends on your audience, but the steps are the same.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Who else has a question? So let me ask you this. Who in this call feels like they are proficient in the strategy dimension? They're good at strategy. Raise your hand or give me a thumbs up if you think you're good. Okay, I don't see any thumbs up. Okay, thank you for being honest. So then how do you think that you can implement this moving forward? Janet, unmute yourself. Tell us.
Well, honestly, by listening to you, I think it's more of of a team effort that sometimes you get caught up in for example, in my role that I manage a pod, sometimes I get caught up too well on my stuff that you tend to deviate from others, like not that you don't pay attention to what they do, but maybe you don't recognize their work as it should, and you don't give them, sorry, the proper feedback, right? That is so important. Like, how do they know that they're doing a good job if you don't tell them? How do they know if they're messing up at something that, if you don't give them the feedback and you don't follow up with them and you don't, not to view the world as they view it, but I think I don't know how to explain it. I think like sometimes you have to be in their position and understand what is it that motivates them, what is it that gets them going. And sometimes you have to use that to your efforts so that you can have a better team, So I think moving forward, it should be more implemented on my end to be more aware of those situationals, to
How
me.
do you think how do you think you can create a better strategy for your team?
I think it's more about meeting more with them, getting more their feedbacks, because sometimes we don't have enough time for that. But then when you have this type of meetings with you about leadership, you notice how important that is. So moving forward, it has to be more communication within the team and hearing their intake about me as well. Because sometimes you might think you're doing an excellent job, but that might not be the case. So,
So let me ask you this. Are you setting time aside to analyze the data, understand if your team is underperforming or meeting expectations? Are you taking the time? And if so, how often?
well, that is something that I do have to improve. I think I used to do it less, but then there was a really good feedback from you uh, quite a while ago. So I did try to use it more. It's just getting the habit of it, like putting a calendar per se and be like, okay, so every Tuesday or every Wednesday, mid of the week, you should revise the data and you should look how your team is performing. Are they over promising and are they under delivering? And that's the only way you could do is by looking at the data. So it will be more of a calendar or of a situational awareness, like, okay, take this time of the day to analyze the data and compare it to what is it that they're giving you. So
Are you doing that, or is that something that you're planning to
I am
implement in the
doing
future?
it. I am doing it, but I don't think I'm doing it as much as I should be doing it per se.
Mm. I don't think any of us are doing it as much as we should.
Yeah, I agree.
the reason I picked on you is because I know we've spoken about this in the past, that, about strategy and about analyzing the data and making sure we recognize patterns. Again, this is something that, because we've talked about it many, many times, and it didn't just happen right there and then, right? It took me telling you many, many, many times, and you still have to improve in that area. So the point I'm trying to make here is, not that I want to pick on Janet, but the point I'm trying to make is that, again, having the knowledge, it's not enough if you don't actually put it into practice. So if everybody did what they knew, we wouldn't have a problem. Just think about it. You already know how to eat healthy. You know what healthy is. You know, that if you want to lose weight or be in shape, you need to eat healthy, you need to exercise, you need to sleep well, you have to have good habits, right? But not most people don't do it. We know what to do to lose weight. We all know, right? And there's a lot of people, I'm speaking for myself, that struggle with their weight. Same here. We assume that because people know things, they should be doing it. A case manager, a team member, a fellow manager, they know this. Well, they're not doing it. Like, what's going on? People don't always do what they know. If they did, we wouldn't have any issues. We wouldn't need managers. We wouldn't need leaders. We wouldn't need, everybody would be very, self-sufficient. So again, practice makes all the difference. Just by knowing this information, just because it makes sense to you, you're like, oh, that's easy. Oh yeah, why do I need to attend this class? That makes sense, like, I don't need it. Yeah, the theory is just the base. The practicing is the 80%. So theory is 20%, practice is 80% with. So again, I encourage you to practice this, to really set aside the time, especially if you're already in a leadership position and you're managing at least one person. Set aside the time and look at the data, reflect, make sure that you're talking to this person, make sure that this person understand that you're explaining the context, that they are aligned with what you want, with what the company needs, with the vision of the company, and that you are creating strategic plans together by doing this strategic analysis. Does that make sense? All right. I have time for one more question or comment. All right, no questions or comments. Okay, somebody's raising their hands. Daniela.
Yes, I have a question, Amalia. When you're looking at data, we mean a lot of numbers sometimes. And how do you know uh, what is a priority? Because when you start looking at numbers, there's so many things you can see, and you can go like through a rabbit hole so quickly and start looking at so many tiny details. So how do you know when to stop and what to prioritize?
Okay, so I'm assuming, like, for example, you're in the demand team, right? So I'm assuming that you have a team and then you are looking at performance. So you're looking at a goal, so a KPI or a goal. So you say, okay, we need to prep 40 packages this week, for example, right? And so you look at the trend. So you look at the numbers that your team is producing, and then you look back and then you compare. So get a month that your team exceeded expectations, that they did great. What they did differently. You have to ask yourself, and you have to ask them, what do you do differently? That time, that's where the feedback model comes very handy. Well, what worked? Where are you getting stuck? What would you do differently? Great tool for that. And so you compare and you say, okay, what happened then? What's happening now? And so you already can see patterns, right? And then you can see if somebody's productivity is really going down. You look at the team as a whole, and then you go granular, and then you go like person by person, because the team might be underperforming, but when you look deeper, it could be, 2 people out of 5. So now all of a sudden, you don't have a team issue, you have a 2 people issue that you have to focus on. And then you go deeper on that. Okay, so what is the issue of those two people? It could be the same issue, it could be different issue. It could be training. It could be that there's no alignment. They don't really care. It could be they don't have the skills. I mean, there's so many things that they could be confused. Again, you could be assigning cases by no fault of your own. Maybe you're assigning only hospital cases to this person and you didn't even realize it. But if you don't look at the data and realize, oh my God, for the past 4 weeks, I've only given complex cases to this person, only hospital cases. Of course, the productivity went down. But again, if you're not analyzing that, how can you even pinpoint the issue? So, does that answer your question, Daniela?
Yes, thank you.
Let me circle around for a second and address another thing. To answer the question at a very large scale, or a very high level, start with your KPIs, right? KPIs, as Amalia said, is true. It's the floor, not the ceiling, right? And we can get into how we set KPIs for every department and show you guys how we came up with them. But the truth is that, you know, if you're just hitting the KPIs across the board, probably going to be actually not hitting your KPIs, and we'll explain that in a later session. But start with your KPIs, look how you're performing, and see if there's any other areas of performance that you need to focus on. But the KPIs, we try to make the 3, 4, 5 KPIs for each person to be like, that's what you have to get done, right? So if you want to analyze, look at your KPIs, look at the KPIs of the people on your team or in your department, and see where you're struggling. And then, you know, Brian Tracy says, eat that frog, right? If you're lagging in your KPIs, or if there's some area of your practice that is holding you back, the next morning, go in and just start working on that. You know, just do that. The first, you know, put aside an hour, 2 hours, first thing in the morning to just get it done. And that will hopefully get you back on track. What happens is, and this is human nature, we all do this, me too, happens is we realize we're not hitting something. And so we put that off and put it off and put it off. Like Amalia said, with diet and exercise, right? Like, I know I need to get back on my diet. I got off my diet for my birthday and for the kids' birthdays and for, you know, our happy hour, all this stuff. I'm completely in free fall on my diet now, right? Up like 5-10 pounds in the last month. I know I need to start it again, but I'm like, Monday, there's freaking chocolate covered popcorn and 66.25. Damn it. You know, like, I eat like 4 handfuls of that stuff. I'll start Monday. We keep kicking the can. When Monday comes around, and be like, oh, I'll start next Monday. Let me eat some more of this, you know, empanadas or whatever the hell it is. We all know we got to draw a line somewhere and say, okay, you know, I'm going to get this KPI back on track. As soon as you realize it's a problem, you want to get that KPI back on track as soon. You want to have an intervention right away. You know, don't kick the can down the line, because we do see that. And then all of a sudden we get to the end of the month and we've kicked 2 KPIs down the line, and, you know, and then the whole department doesn't meet the numbers because you guys haven't hit the numbers we've established. So just, you know, start with the KPIs, focus on it, get in the habit of eating the frog. First thing in the morning, if you see something's coming off the track, just force yourself to sit down and do it. Get in the habit of doing the hard thing first, and then everything else will fall into place. I hope that helps. You know, we all struggle with it. If I didn't struggle with it, I'd be super fit right now. So,
and I
you know,
want you to and I want you to pay attention to what he said, and like thinking about what we just talked about. You see how he's doing the strategic thinking in the way he's speaking, but you also need to understand that everything that he said is right. But when you communicate that to your team, make sure that you're using the 3 competencies that you need. Everything needs to make sense. So you need to explain to them the why. Why do we need to do this? Remember, like, the goal is just a number, but why do we have that goal? There is a deeper meaning to the why. So, and make sure that there's alignment. You can have a KPI, but if the person doesn't care and it's not aligned, they're not going to do it. So whenever I see poor performance, the first thing I look at is this person even aligned with with the organization? Because they might not even care, right? And then making sure that you're doing the strategic thinking so you have a plan. So what he's saying about eating the frog and all of that, that's pure strategic thinking. That's just like, in his mind, he's creating the priorities. He understands how, leaving the hard task for last, it's not going to be good for the result. And that's why he's telling you to eat the frog. But again, it's guiding your team through that mental map, to that, so they can get there. All right. All right, guys. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you next Wednesday, and we're going to be talking about the second dimension with each team. Okay. So I'll see you guys. Thank you, and bye, and practice. Ciao.